Welcome to Ascend and Awaken, a life of balance. What if everything you thought was making you more spiritual was actually making you more lost? What if the very thing you were trying to dissolve was quietly hijacking your meditation retreats, crystals, breathwork sessions, ayahuasca ceremonies, spiritual books, and the gurus you follow? What I'm about to say may be the most uncomfortable yet liberating thing you hear this year, so stay with me. This isn't just superficial inspiration or feel-good quotes, but a genuine, unvarnished exploration that genuinely transforms your perception of yourself and the world. Today we are talking about something that the spiritual community almost never talks about honestly, and that is spiritual materialism. This is the trap that even the most sincere seekers fall into. This trap can be difficult to identify as it often masquerades as progress. Let's start at the beginning. The term spiritual materialism was first introduced by a Tibetan Buddhist teacher named Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. He wrote about it in his 1970s book, and what he described was so precise that it applies even more powerfully today. His core insight was this: the ego is not just a problem in the material world, the ego follows you onto the spiritual path. And not only does it follow you, but it also gets smarter there. It learns to dress itself in robes, mantras, and breathwork sessions. It learns to speak the language of awakening while still running the same old program underneath. So what exactly is spiritual materialism? Let me break it down in plain language. Materialism, in the traditional sense, is when we use the accumulation of things, money, status, and possessions to build a sense of self. This is done to feel secure, worthy, and superior. Spiritual materialism is when we do the exact same thing, but we use spiritual experiences, knowledge, practices, and identities instead of material objects. The currency changes. The game stays exactly the same. Think about the situation for a moment. Have you seen someone, maybe even yourself, use spiritual words in conversation to subtly convey something about their identity? Have you ever felt a quiet pride when you meditated longer than usual, or when you completed a difficult retreat? Have you ever felt even a tiny flicker of superiority when someone around you seemed less evolved, less conscious, or less awake? That feeling, that quiet, subtle, self-congratulatory warmth, is the ego disguised in a spiritual costume. And here is the terrifying part. The more sincere you are as a seeker, the more vulnerable you are to this trap. This is because a sincere seeker makes a greater effort. The sincere seeker collects more experiences, reads more books, goes to more retreats, and deepens more practices. If you're not careful, all of those things can become another brick in the ego's fortress. Now I want to present what I call the three main faces of spiritual materialism, because this concept does not appear as a single entity. It shapeshifts. The first face is the accumulation of spiritual experiences. In the material world, we collect things: cars, houses, designer clothes. In the spiritual world, the ego starts collecting peak experiences. During meditation, you experienced a sense of unity. During your plant medicine journey, you may have experienced a profound vision. The moment when a guru gazed directly into your eyes, you experienced a profound sense of being seen. The ego catalogs these experiences and uses them to build an identity. I am someone who has had profound spiritual openings. I am someone who has done the deep work. I am someone who has been on this path for years. Do you see what is happening there? Every single one of those statements begins with I am. The ego is still at the controls, just with a much more impressive resume. The second face is the accumulation of spiritual knowledge. This one is incredibly seductive because knowledge feels like genuine progress. And in some ways it is. Understanding the nature of consciousness, learning about different traditions, and studying the teachings of great masters, these things genuinely expand your awareness. But the ego can take all of that knowledge and use it as armor. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone deployed spiritual concepts not to explore truth together, but to win the argument? Where the language of non-duality or karma or shadow work was used as a kind of intellectual superiority. That is spiritual knowledge being weaponized by ego. The truly wise person holds their knowledge lightly. The ego grips it like a sword. The third face is the accumulation of a spiritual identity. This might be the subtlest and most dangerous of the three. At some point in the journey, you start to see yourself as a spiritual person, and that identification becomes its own prison, because now you have something to protect. You have to act in accordance with your spiritual identity. You have to maintain the image. You cannot be seen getting angry or petty or confused or human, because that would threaten the story you are telling about yourself and the story others have come to believe about you. The spiritual teacher who cannot admit they were wrong, the healer who refuses therapy, the meditator who dismisses their own grief because they have transcended attachment. These are all expressions of the same trap. Now, here is where I want to slow down and really sit with something, because I think this is the most psychologically important piece of this entire conversation. The ego does not resist the spiritual path. It co-opts it. There is a profound difference between those two things. If the ego resisted, it would be obvious. You would feel yourself pulling away from spiritual practice, finding excuses not to meditate, and avoiding the question of who you really are. That kind of resistance is actually easier to spot and work with. But what happens for most sincere seekers is something far more insidious. The ego embraces the spiritual path enthusiastically. It becomes the spiritual path's biggest fan. It signs up for every workshop. It buys every book. It follows every teacher. Why? Because it has realized that the spiritual path is an extraordinarily sophisticated way to feel special, to feel safe, and to feel superior, all while appearing humble and open. This is what the great teacher Krishnamurti pointed to repeatedly throughout his life. He was deeply suspicious of organized spiritual movements, of guru worship, and of any system that promised to deliver you to truth, not because those things have no value, but because the moment you make them into a destination, the ego has something to chase, and the ego loves to chase. The chase itself becomes the identity. I am a seeker. But here is the question that changes everything. What are you seeking? If you are honest, radically honest, sometimes the answer is not enlightenment. Sometimes the answer is relief from anxiety, belonging, a feeling of significance, an escape from the messiness of ordinary human life. None of those things are wrong. They are deeply human. But if they are the actual driver, and you dress them up in spiritual language, you are not on a spiritual path. You are on a very sophisticated avoidance strategy. So how do you get out of this trap? How do you work with spiritual materialism when you catch yourself in it? The first and most important step is radical honesty, not brutal self-attack, but clear seeing. When you notice yourself dropping spiritual vocabulary to impress someone, just notice it. When you feel that quiet superiority around someone who seems less evolved, just notice it. You do not need to shame yourself. Shame is just another ego move. But you do need to see clearly. Clarity is the beginning of freedom. The second step is what I call returning to the body and the ordinary. Real spiritual maturity is not found primarily in peak experiences. It is found in how you wash the dishes, how you listen to a friend who is struggling, how you show up for the mundane, repetitive, unglamorous aspects of your life. The ego hates the ordinary. It wants to transcend. Real presence lives in the ordinary. It has nowhere to transcend to, because it recognizes that right here, right now, is already complete. The third step is what Trungpa called surrendering the spiritual trip. This does not mean abandoning practice or teachers or tradition. It means holding them differently, using them as tools rather than trophies, letting them loosen your grip rather than give you more to grip. A genuine practice dissolves the one who is practicing, not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually the center of gravity shifts. There is less of a someone trying to get somewhere and more of an open, curious presence moving through life without needing to claim it. The fourth step is community and accountability. Find people who will call you on your spiritual ego, not cruelly, but lovingly and honestly. The spiritual community that only reflects your grandeur back to you is a mirror room. You need people who see through the costume and love the human underneath it. Here is where I want to land this whole conversation. The trap of spiritual materialism is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are engaged, that you are trying, and that you care deeply about waking up. The ego's sophistication on the spiritual path is almost a compliment. It means the stakes feel high. But the invitation, the real invitation, is to stop using the path to become someone and instead let the path reveal that the someone you were trying to become was always just a story. What remains when that story quiets down is not nothing. It is not emptiness as absence. It is presence as fullness. It is the life that was here before you started trying to improve it, radically alive, radically ordinary, and radically free. If this conversation landed somewhere real for you, share it with someone you trust on the path, not to show them they are doing it wrong, but because this stuff is easier to navigate together. Drop your thoughts below. I genuinely want to hear where this hits home for you. And if you are new here and want to keep going deeper, subscribe and stick around. There is so much more to explore together. I will see you in the next one. Peace, love, and light to you on your spiritual journey.